They're total, complete
It's
game.
really cool.
Good evening, everyone. It's October 16th, 2023, and this is a regular meeting of the Moscow City Council. Julia.
Please stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first up tonight, we have a proclamation, and this is Domestic Violence Action Month Proclamation. Whereas domestic violence violates an individual's dignity, security, and humanity and is a crime with sweeping effects on our community's safety and health, and whereas survivors of domestic violence should have help to find the compassion and healing they deserve, and the perpetrators of violence should be held accountable for their actions. And whereas all residents of Moscow should feel safe and at peace in their homes, and whereas our youth deserve information and education on healthy relationships, boundaries, and consent, and whereas Alternatives to Violence on the Palouse, ATVP, is committed to ending violence in our community through prevention education and has been providing services to those affected by violence for 43 years. And whereas a local coalition of organizations exists to directly confront domestic violence, including law enforcement officers, victims advocates, prosecutors, healthcare providers, faith leaders, and concerned Moscow residents. And whereas the city of Moscow is an important partner in ATVP's vision to create a community that is safe, equitable, and free from oppression that leads to domestic violence. Now, therefore, I, Arthur D. Betke, Mayor of the City of Moscow, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2023 as Domestic Violence Action Month in the City of Moscow. And I encourage all citizens to reflect and honor victims and survivors of domestic violence in our community, and also use this month to take action towards ending violence on the Palouse. And I think we have Letty Atade here to receive the proclamation. So stand right over about here.
You can get up, Joe.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of ATVP, thank you. I know a lot of people are here and who are always there to support us. We don't only celebrate domestic violence every month, but we do it every day, yearly, every day. So on behalf of ATVP, thank you.
Thanks, Letty.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you very much for all you guys do. Nice work. Next up is a consent agenda, and this consists of items that have been previously vetted by members of City Council on the Public Works and Finance Committee or the Administrative Committee, and consist of items that are non-controversial or routine in nature. Do I hear a motion relative?
So moved, if I could, yeah, Your Honor, I move approval of the consent agenda as
Thank you.
presented. I was waiting for Gina. It's usually your jam. I'll take it this time.
Okay, a motion and a second. So Maureen. You have to vote.
Oh, aye. Usually we go down the line, but not
Yeah.
catch me off guard here.
Sandra,
Aye.
Drew,
Aye.
and Haley.
Aye.
Okay, the
Mix up those names. Here we go.
I've got a randomized list of names right here that keep you guys from following each other too closely. Okay, on to the regular agenda. Mayor has no appointments to make this week. And so we move on to public comment and mayor's response period. And for the next 15 minutes in 3-minute increments, we invite members of the public to come up and tell us what's on their mind, as long as it's not on tonight's agenda nor pending before Planning and Zoning Commission or the Board of Adjustment. Any takers for their 3 minutes worth of chat? Oh, good, we've got one. Just come up and give us your name and address and launch right in.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ella Weber. I'm at 322 South Asbury Street. If we don't know each other, like I said, my name is Ella Weber, and I'm the ASUI Director of Community and Civic Involvement. On behalf of ASUI and President McLean, we would like to invite all of you to the City Council and Zone 4 School Board Candidate Forum that is happening tomorrow from 5 to 6:45 p.m. It will take place in the ASUI Vandal Lounge located on the second floor of the iSub. We are co-hosting the forum with the Moscow chapter of the League of Women Voters, and we hope to highlight issues to students and the university just before students head to the polls on November 7th. It'll be moderated by 2 current members of ASUI, and although it is a forum for the candidates who will be on the November ballot, we hope that you will attend and receive insight into what issues students are facing in our community. Additionally, I would just like to thank Mayor Becky for helping organize this year's Fall Town and Gown on November 2nd. Like every semester, we at ASUI are all very excited and are looking forward to discussing our current projects and hearing what the city is working on. We hope that you can all attend.
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Where is the best place to park?
Good question. So since it is after 5 p.m., you're able to park in the gold lots. So by the Memorial Gym, that would be probably the closest area for
And
people
then
to
the
park.
law school library?
And probably the law school library.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
Thanks, Ella.
Good evening. It's nice to see so many familiar faces. I'm Erin Bacon, 1628 Rolling Hills Drive here in Moscow. So I just want to disclose that I do work for the school district, but this is in no way, my comments are in no way representing the school district. I'm just here as a mom and as a community member. What I want to share with you this evening is just a little more understanding about youth drug addiction, not just use and misuse, but particularly addiction. So we have kids in this community that are addicted, and many of the measures that we use to mitigate that are punitive, meaning that kids are punished. We don't have mechanisms to help kids get clean and then support to stay clean. So one of the things that they use for kids to get clean is potentially going to a juvenile detention center. And while they're there, they do get off drugs, but when they come home, the relapse rate is relatively high. So I think one of the saddest things that I've heard in my time as a mom is just the sad story of a 13-year-old boy saying, I want to quit, but I don't know how, and I don't have support, and I've tried so many times. And then we also have kids in the middle school and the high school that are afraid to use the bathrooms because they don't want to be associated with kids that are vaping in the bathrooms. They don't want to get in trouble. So we have this bathroom inequity where they feel like they can't use the restroom at school because it's not safe. So I just encourage you to be mindful and to be thoughtful and to really think through what would a loving approach be to offer help. You know, we don't ask adults to power through alcoholism. We have support mechanisms for that, and we're understanding. And it's not fair for our youth to have the same or a different expectation where they're just supposed to power through. There are communities around our nation that address this and address it well. And I believe that Moscow could be one of them. I think our greatest asset here in Moscow is us, some of the people that are here in this room, that are mindful, that are thoughtful, that are smart, and that are caring. So thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Appreciate that.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. David Hall, Moscow. Just a reminder, the Water Summit is next week on the 25th, if I'm not mistaken. I don't have the times written here, but
I think it starts at
fourth
4.
reminder.
4:30 start. I think we'll get more details here in just a second.
It's in the audience.
Would the other details in the audience like to speak?
No pressure.
Thank you, David. Paul Kimmel, 1037 4 Mile Road, Viola. I'm here on behalf of the Palouse Basin Water Summit. This is our 20th year. We'd cordially invite all of you to attend. And first and foremost, thank you for your support for these past 20 years. It's an important conversation with our communities. And as I think you'll hear in just a short time from Tyler and maybe a few others, where we are and the progress we've made on our water situation. We're far from over, but I think this year's keynote speaker, Erica Geis, wrote the book Water Always Wins. So we've titled this summit Transforming Our Relationship with Water. So we have a great lineup. Besides our keynote, we have our two mayors have some exciting news to share with us. We'll hear from the Idaho Water Resources Executive Manager about some of the work that they're doing supporting us. As Tyler will probably say, we did secure some additional funding from the state of Idaho recently on water studies. We'll hear from National Weather Service about a long-term weather outlook as well. We're going to brag up on Schweitzer Engineering a little bit and the printed circuit board plant and how little water they use, which is really exciting. Really exciting. We'll hear from the Pacific Institute, which is a West Coast-based water advocacy group, and I've been trying to get them on our summit agenda for a long time, but some best practices mostly around water conservation, but just some really cool things going on there, more of a challenge and an encouragement. And then, of course, our executive director from the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee will give our state of the basin. So with that, we'll have a little fun. We'll have some interactive polling along the way. We'll have some appetizers and beverages as well. So again, it's an important conversation. Really appreciate all your support. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Want to recap the where and when for us once more?
Oh, thank you very much. I left some cards here. Next Thursday, October 26th, doors open at 4:30. Program begins at 5:30. We'll be at the Schweitzer Event Center in Pullman.
Perfect.
And it's free. So encourage everybody to come.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Paul.
Mayor.
Still have time remaining. Would anybody else like to pop up? Going, gone. Okay. Next up is a citizen commission report from the Parks and Rec Commission, David Schott and Catherine Hamer.
Sitting back and ready.
Entertain us, David. Go for it.
All right.
Wow.
Mayor Becky, members of council, thank you so much for having us this evening. I'd like to introduce Kat Harner, the Vice Chair of our Parks and Recreation Commission, who will be presenting our annual report this year. Kat has been with the Parks and Recreation Commission since April of 2022, and she's been a real pleasure to work with on the commission. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kat.
Thank you, David, members of council, Mayor Becky, and members of our community. So again, my name's Kat Harner. My husband served on the Parks and Rec Commission for a while, and as a member of the community, I was so excited about my opportunity to better serve my community. I have 4 kids, and we have such an awesome Parks and Rec department that I'm just glad I get to be a part of it. So I am representing the Parks and Rec Commission today, instead of our chair. So I will try not to insult you by reading the whole thing, but I get a little nervous sometimes. So again, Nancy Tribble is our chair. She is unavailable. There's my lovely family in the middle there. We also have Ted, who served for quite a while, Rich Gaylor, Susan Steele, Mark Hyland, Gretchen Hayes, who was able to be here this evening, also with 4 kids, Jeff Pilcher. Yeah. We all look like we're having a terrible time up there. So the commission advises you guys, the mayors and the city council, on matters such as playgrounds, athletic fields, facilities, and other things. We've been really busy this year and doing a lot of cool things. And we also kind of recommend short and long-term improvements that we can make to the city to better serve you guys, everybody, whether it's for recreation and also cultural needs, representing everybody and all the needs as best we can. The commission makes recommendations regarding policies, programs, personnel, and budget. And we also take, just like tonight, we take comments from the community to, again, better serve us, the citizens of this lovely city. So just kind of a quick overview. We made every year we make another pesticide-free park. This year it was Kiwanis Park, which I love so much because my kids go to McDonald and it's nice when they're playing there that I know it's a nice healthy place for them to play. Mamba, the mountain bike association here in town, has been doing some really cool things on Moscow Mountain, working with Parks and Rec to clear more trails and have more places to recreate during the winter, summer, fall, just every season. Lola Clyde is going to undergo some great changes. David went down to Boise and got us a great grant that we can use to make it more accessible to more people. Path around the park that'll connect it to PCEI, which is a really cool thing. I love that park. If you have not been to Lola Clyde, it's beautiful. And we'll get a bathroom hopefully eventually there that's more permanent and make it more accessible and safe with sidewalks over there and such. Right now it's a gravel lot. So the parks bench donation program, you guys have all seen the benches around town. We just raised the donation just slightly just to make sure that we're covering the cost of the bench. Which is pretty fair. And is it 2,000? What's the going rate for benches?
Councilor Kelly, we went from the old rate of $1,500 for a donation for a park bench up to $2,200.
Thank you.
And let's see, the Bee City USA, which is a really cool thing that we're doing. We can go to the Parks and Rec website and you can go on there and figure out what plants you can plant at your house and your garden that'll naturally bring the bees in, helping your little local farm out, and having local native plant nursery lists that can help you find those plants. The Fall Pollinator Project, Harvest Park, as you see up there, has been a really cool addition to the parks. Currently, they're kind of developing it a little bit at a time, adding more trees and more offerings, and eventually you'll be able to go around the whole park and just pick to your heart's desire. It's a really cool thing. I really, really think that's cool. The 1912 Center, one of our beautiful feature buildings here in town. If you haven't been in there a while, it's undergone some major changes. We've had some great donors that have helped to resurface the floors and get windows in there better, keeping things insulated and warm during the winter. And on the bottom right there, they even are having kids on field trips that'll go and kind of sit in what the classroom would have felt like. A couple of my kids have gone and really enjoyed that experience. So it's kind of a really cool thing that they're doing over at the 1912 Center. So those are two new rooms that were, two rooms that were newly renamed and christened. So we also go over potentially new parkland dedication. So there's going to be a South Moscow Business Park. It's amazing to see how much Moscow has been growing. If you drive different parts of town, there's a road where there used to not be. So yeah, that business park, we're hoping to have a trail along that will be accessible for bikes, maybe expand the Paradise Creek Trail. War Bonnet Lot Division, we will have a park over there sort of above Walmart. So that'll be nice for that side of town. It'll be the westernmost park in Moscow. And then the Wild Rose Court Subdivision will be putting in pathways so that it can connect the subdivision better, making it more safe for our kids to ride their bikes around, or people that are walking to have a safe place to commute by. The pickleball courts, I think, have been one of the most popular additions this year. It's a really cool space out there. Dave and others have worked really hard on getting it. Oh, oops. You already had your turn. There we go. So all the members of the Damon Burton family came out, I believe, from, was it Pennsylvania? It was across the country where they came from. But this summer it was real cool. We had a lot of members of the Parks and Rec Commission come out and celebrate and play. You can borrow paddles and stuff from the Parks and Rec office. And also during the winter time, I know this gets you don't know where to play. You can also play at the Herc. But yeah, this is a real cool place that they really fought hard for. And it was part of our annual tour. We went around to see this park, others in town. Sorry, I jumped ahead a little bit. We had a couple farmers markets where we went to kind of feature one of the first farmers markets. We talked about the Bee City USA, talking about what it means and what we've done to kind of bring Moscow into that. You notice around town, a lot of the gardens that we have are pollinator friendly to kind of encourage other people to see what you can do with your space. The second farmers market was to get involvement in recreation with not only kids, but getting their parents involved and excited about all the possibilities that are in the Parks and Rec brochure. There's lots of things to do. And again, the annual tour, which I touched lightly on, we just jumped into a van and drove around and checked out a lot of our cool offerings. There was no way to do it all in one evening because how many parks do we have, David? We have more than 5.
We visited 5.
We visited 5, but yeah. So there's a lot of parks in town. We got to see some of the bigger ones. And this, I believe, is East City Park. Yesterday? No, I don't know what the date is of this photo, but Parks and Rec has been around for a long time, and we hope to do big things for the future too.
Look at those young trees.
Thanks. Who's got questions, comments?
When do we get to do a tour?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What?
I mean, I guess we can all tour whenever.
Something like that.
Good. I'll only comment to say that I agree 100% that our parks are great. And I love, it's like, I forgot about that park. How great is that? We have so many parks. I forget about a park. Very cool. Thanks for all your work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Stuff. Thanks.
Thanks, Kat.
Right then, next up is alternative water supply update from Tyler Palmer. Take it away, Tyler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hold up. All right. Well, Your Honor, Council, happy to be here to provide yet another update on our water alternative supply project. I've been back here many times over the years talking about this, and it's encouraging to see that is increasing in frequency, because I think that means that things are happening. And really want to thank the council for their leadership on this topic. It's been something that's been on the forefront of, I know, your minds and also the communities. We hear a lot from the community, and it's been very encouraging just in the time that I've worked on this problem in the last decade to see the uptick in interest in this, the uptick in awareness. People generally know that there is a challenge, and they are encouraged that we are working toward a solution. And so that's really encouraging. And so tonight we're going to just talk about progress, where we're at and what's going on, because it's been a minute since we've been back here. But before I dive in, I would like to, I know many of you have met him, but for those who have not, I'd like to introduce our new executive director, Michael Fappel, and let him introduce himself to y'all, and I'll dive into the rest of the report.
Thanks. I've met a few of you, like Tyler said, and I've already, I started in July, and I've seen a huge amount of support and leadership from the staff and the elected folks in the city of Moscow. So we sure appreciate that. So I'm Mike Fappel. I talk this way because I lived in Arkansas a long time. I'm a Palouse person now. I've lived near here for 2 years now, and this is my home.
You can say Pullman. It's okay.
I live in Pullman. I shop and spend my money in Moscow. Those are just facts. My background professionally, the relevance are sustainability and water quality and abundance. And this opportunity came up, and I just couldn't pass on it. And I mean, Tyler's going to give you the update, but thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
All right. So yeah, we're really happy to get Mike on board. He's been really great, gotten up to speed quickly, and it's an exciting time to be getting involved in our work toward an alternate water supply. So just very briefly, as a reminder, the city participates in the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee, known as PBAC. We are one of several entities working toward a solution, and this is a very encouraging organization because it means that we are working in concert with people instead of at loggerheads with people. And that is something that isn't always the case, and sometimes is kind of fairly rare in the water world. And so it's something that's very unique, and we're confident that as we work toward a solution, we can set an example, not just locally, but nationally, for how to work cooperatively toward big solutions on very challenging problems. We have our 4 major pumping entities, which are the City of Moscow, the University of Idaho, the City of Pullman, and Washington State University. All of these entities own water systems and directly pump into municipal systems for their users. The Palouse Basin, just as a quick refresher, we have a single source of water. They are aquifers. The story of where every city is in the whole world is the story of water. The availability of fresh water is why every city is where it's at, and that's no exception here. We had artesian wells initially in this area, and that's a result of very thick clay layers that are impermeable. And so it would hold the water under pressure. And then as you pop a hole in that clay layer, out comes the water. And so you can see in this particular slide, this was in Pullman. It was called Pullman's Great Artesian Well, and it was producing 3 million gallons per day, just bubbling out of the water or bubbling out of the ground. Some PBAC research led to an updated basin boundary, and this is the updated boundary for our basin. There was some uncertainty for a while about whether or not Colfax was included in our basin, but we've got enough research now that we can fairly confidently say that Colfax is not in the Palouse Basin. And so that resulted in, that was the most significant aspect of the update. So we're a relatively small basin. But as you are all very acutely aware, our area punches above its weight as far as visibility and importance, both to the state of Washington and the state of Idaho. And then beyond that, through our education institutions, and as the gathering places for both Whitman and Latah counties. And so they're very important communities that really outstrip the size of what we are. This is a profile of the basin. As I indicated, there are we have an aquifer. It's a basalt aquifer. We have sediments that are water bearing, and then those are interspersed with thick clay layers that are just a result of the geologic formation of the Palouse.
Can I ask, is the unsurveyed, I can't tell if this is like meant to represent between Moscow and Pullman geographically. Can we not get to it because of tools or because of
we don't have
bureaucracy?
There's never been wells drilled.
Okay,
So when we find out what the profiles are, it's taking the tailings from a well being drilled and analyzing those. And so as a well is drilled, currently we had one very recently done in Genesee, and we've got the tailings from that. So you'll analyze those, and then we can check those against the rest of the area. So we just don't have anything that deep in that area. Since the artesian days, it has consistently diminished. The water level has decreased. In some years, it was as much as 3 feet per year. More recently, it was 1 foot per year. And encouragingly, we're down to a little over half a foot per year, about 0.7 feet per year. And that decrease, we think, is at least in part to a concerted effort at conservation. Something that we really need to congratulate our communities on is their conservation. What this slide indicates is our population growth versus our water use. And as you can see here, Moscow has had a population growth of 37% since 1992. And the reason 1992 is the date on here is that was the year that the groundwater management plan was agreed upon. In that period, we've actually seen a 3% decrease in water pumping. And that's pretty incredible to have that to have our communities respond to the conservation message in that way. And we think there's more that we can do. We really believe that we can conserve even more. And that's really encouraging. But we also have among the lowest per capita water use numbers in the state. But as I mentioned, despite that, we continue to see declining water levels. And so it's important that we work on a solution. You don't have to read too far into the news to find headlines abounding about water shortages. It's an era that we live in. Water challenges will not get easier. It will not get cheaper. Water rights will not get easier to get. And so it's important that we stay ahead of this because, as you are all well aware, these are large-scale, complicated projects that we're talking about here, and it will take time. And so it's really important that we stay diligent and continue to work on these things. So in that spirit, PBAC has engaged in studies, 2 major studies over the last several years to identify what really are alternatives. What are the feasible sources of water that we could use as alternate water supply sources? Those were broken down initially into 4 alternatives, and those alternatives were based on the projected need on a 50-year demand horizon, and then a 30% component that is what we estimate it would take to stabilize the aquifer. So that 30% is to have us not overpump the aquifer, and then the rest is that to meet that 50-year demand horizon. And so these are the alternatives. I think you're all really pretty familiar with these, so I won't spend a ton of time on these. Alternative 1 is something that's been talked about for a while. It's a concept that's been around since there was a pumped storage proposal back in the 60s. When there were concerns about power supply issues in central Washington. And so this is not a new concept. It's to take water out of the Snake River and pump it up the hill, treat it, and then deliver the treated water to both Pullman and Moscow. Alternative 2 has direct use of the North Fork of the Palouse River, and so that would just be a diversion on the North Fork that would be treated and used, and then aquifer recharge from the South Fork of the Palouse River or Paradise Creek. Alternative 3 is largely a result of a study that the City of Moscow commissioned to look at the drainages on Moscow Mountain and analyze the feasibility of having a reservoir on the mountain. Flanagan Creek was identified as the most likely candidate due to the cost of the infrastructure necessary to build the reservoir and then deliver the water to Moscow. And then it also includes direct use of the South Fork in Pullman. Alternative 4 had several smaller projects, aquifer recharge from the South Fork, Moscow wastewater reuse, expanding that system, Pullman wastewater reuse, building a reuse system for Pullman's wastewater, additional water conservation, and aquifer recharge from Paradise Creek. There was an additional alternative that became called Alternative 5 that was initially identified as a preferred alternative that was basically the components of Alternative 4, but rather than aquifer recharge, it was direct use. There have been a lot of concerns that we've heard from the community about aquifer recharge, with primarily being that the water that's down there now has been protected for a long time by thick clay layers and has been filtered down through the earth. And the water that we would put in, even though we would have to treat it to drinking water standards, it would be current drinking water standards. And so there are concerns about emerging contaminants that we may not be monitoring for or may not be regulated now that we could be injecting into water that doesn't already otherwise have it. And so due to that, it was looked at as a possibility to just have direct use. What I'd like to talk about today is where we've been since we had identified that Alternative 5. There have been a couple of fairly major developments that have necessitated a relook and a recalibration of our prioritization of these alternatives. And one of the things I want to emphasize is these alternatives the process of identifying an alternative was never intended to be a process of elimination of the others. We know that this is a very complicated process, and we know that at any point we could reach a dead end on any of these alternatives. It could be due to fisheries. It could be due to water rights. It could be due to needing to transport water across state lines. There's any number of things that could really become a poison pill on any of these. So it's important that while we have a focus, that we keep in mind that we're going to need to move all of these along and be ready to pivot as necessary. And that's really where we're at right now, due to a couple of items. One being we have the adjudication of the Palouse Basin happening now, and the tribal claims in that basin were fairly extensive and would have an enormous impact on most of all of the projects in Alternative 5, with the exception of additional conservation. And so as we're working through that process, it's important that we not have an alternative that we're moving forward with and promoting that is in direct conflict with what the tribal claims are as they're working through that adjudication process. They are in settlement talks now. That is something that is actively ongoing, and they have been really great about reaching out to PBAC and to the city of Moscow and to hear our voice in this and understand what our needs are as they work through it. But none of us know how that will shake out. More importantly, in the aftermath of identifying Alternative 5, we had Steve Robichon, who's PBAC's technical advisor, who many of you may recall. He was the longtime executive director for us, and he has transitioned into a technical advisor role. Further analyze the options in Alternative 5. There were some concerns that the model that we'd used and what we looked at hadn't fully taken into account some of the expenses that could be incurred in that, including things like storage, the treatability of the water. While the water volume's there, we're seeing increased volatility in when the water comes with climate change. And so it's important that we understand what those long-term impacts are, because this is long-term infrastructure. And so it's something that we wouldn't want to throw a lot of money at something and then be like, oof, it doesn't work. When the water comes, either we don't have the capacity to store it, or it's really difficult to treat it and very expensive, or we just can't capture it because it's coming down in such a slug that there's just no way for us to capture it adequately. And then in addition to that, there had been some resuscitated conversations with Avista Utilities about the potential for a pumped storage scheme. That's really nascent right now, but it is something that they are looking at doing some studies on to see if that can help them meet some of their sustainable energy requirements that they have for their power portfolio. So we held a workshop with the committee recently and had really good participation and talked through our approach. As Paul had indicated in his comments earlier today, the Idaho Water Resources Board and the Idaho Division of Water Resources have really been champions of our work. They've been great to work with, and they have recently committed $182,500 to our efforts for continued studies. And that's something that we really want to work with the state of Washington to see if we can get a commensurate commitment from the state of Washington and really move this along. In that workshop, we discussed these more recent developments that we've had, and there was an agreement that we are going to proceed with a focus on Alternative 1 while continuing to work on filling data gaps on any of the alternatives that we have a strategic ability to fill data gaps on, but really try and put our focus with some of these funds coming available on Alternative 1. Some of the advantages to Alternative 1 are, one, just the amount of water that we actually represent in that body of water is pretty small, especially when you look at the other bodies of water that we're looking at, where we would represent a far larger percentage of the available flows in those facilities. In the Snake River, we're just not much. So we don't represent very much of that flow at all. And so it also means that our ability to meet future needs could be easier with that. In our discussions with places like fisheries, this was an alternative that they thought may be more palatable, largely for that same reason. We just represent such a small amount of what would come out of there. And so there's more of an ability, likely an ability to get water rights. And we already know it's a constructible project. We know from an engineering perspective, it's a technically feasible project. And as we think about climate change in the future of some of these different bodies of water, it seems prudent to look at the body of water that has the most flows and is least likely to be dramatically impacted by climate change, like some of these other bodies of water may be. And so for that reason, the focus is going to be on Alternative 1 as our top priority right now. But also I want to mention that we've really decided that the additional conservation needs to be a part of any of these alternatives, that's just smart. A 50-year alternative can become a lot less expensive if we can make it a 60-year alternative or a 70-year alternative or an 80-year alternative through conservation. So really by conserving more, we just kick the can down the road, because keeping in mind, this is a 50-year demand horizon. And I think we all hope this community is here for more than 50 years. And so that's why I think it is important that any opportunity we have to continue to fill data gaps on any of these alternatives, it's important, because it's likely that in the next 100, 150, 200 years that we all hope this is still a community. I mean, some of us in the room will have grandkids that'll be wanting to still live here, or great grandkids that want to still be living here, that we'll have to implement more than one of these alternatives over the long term in order to achieve a sustainable water future. So with that, I'd be happy to try and answer any questions that you all might have. I know I went through a lot really quick, but I do think it's something that most of you have stayed fairly well abreast of. So happy to try and answer any questions you might have.
So I have one, Tyler, and I apologize. It might be an answer you have to get to me later, but with alternate one, pumping water up, recharging the aquifer, since we don't know the depth at certain levels of the aquifer, and we're pulling at different points, I guess where's it dumping in at an aquifer? Is it central between both Moscow and Pullman? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I understand, Drew. Alternate one would not involve any direct aquifer recharge. So the aquifer stabilization would come as a result of reduced pumping. Alternative one would pull the water up, treat it, and directly inject it into the water systems. So it'd be a direct use alternative. And so it would never enter the aquifer. We'd pull up the surface water, treat the surface water to drinking water standards, and then that would just be a supplemental supply into our water system.
Okay.
So yeah, there is no direct injection into the aquifer with alternative one.
Thank you for always being able to answer the hard question.
Julia.
What do you foresee as conservation measures that we could add to the area that might make a significant impact?
We have initiated conversations about the potential for a regional water conservation plan, a basin water conservation plan. We feel like, I think it'll really help resonate with everyone if they know that everybody in the basin is doing their part. Obviously, we have very different entities. And so, the things that Moscow might adopt will be really different than the universities would adopt because, they don't have meters and ratepayers. They just have a very different structure and system. But we're well on our way in those conversations. Really the first fruit that was born of those conversations was the city of Pullman adopting water season. They didn't open and close the irrigation season previously, and to their immense credit, they passed an ordinance recently doing that. What we've had staff go through, and we've conducted an initial review and identified basically what are all the water conservation things happening everywhere. I mean, we looked not just nationwide, but worldwide. We wanted to take cast a big net and look at all of them. And then we're starting the arduous process of filtering out what's feasible here. And when I say feasible, both technically, practically, and legally feasible, because there are different requirements. So even from Washington to Idaho, there are different things that we can do. And so we've really tried to put our focus initially with the carrot stuff. For example, we implemented this year water audits that we've got Kelly Cooper. We paid to have her trained up to conduct water audits, and really didn't know what kind of response we'd get from the community. And it has been overwhelming. It's been incredible. She's been on every day of the summer out conducting water audits. Poor girl comes back with soaking wet shoes every day. So the community has really responded well to those sorts of things. We've had really good participation in our toilet rebates. We've had really good participation in our lawn rebates. And so those are really paying dividends. And so we'll continue to bring back to council as we finalize the review, which we hope to finalize our initial review over the course of this winter. We want to come back to the council in the spring with some recommendations for updates to our water conservation plan that will be in concert with the city of Pullman.
Thank you.
This might be the dumbest question that you get asked, but I'm going to do it anyway because I don't know the answer to it. So can we just go down to the Snake and get the water and pump it up to Moscow? Does that belong to somebody?
It will certainly, it will be complicated. It will require acts likely on a federal level. We'll likely need legislation on a federal level, especially if we're bringing water across state lines. So for example, if the diversion is in Washington state and then we're going to it's not unprecedented. It happens, and it happens in quite a few places, but it will be complicated. We will have to procure the water rights. There's not just, water for the taking down there if you can get a pipe in the river.
Well, yeah.
And so it would involve the procurement of water rights, and there are a variety of ways that you can go about procuring water rights, but not at all a dumb question. That is one of the key questions and one of the most complicated questions. And so, yeah, there will be a lot of work that goes into that.
When you say we, is that we Moscow, we PBAC, we Pullman, we?
As the project develops, there will certainly be a handoff point because PBAC is not set up as an entity to own that type of project.
Okay.
PBAC will be working on this. PBAC is the organism, the container that we use to keep us all rowing in the same direction, to keep us all coordinated. When we get to the point where we're actually starting design for construction, the project will need to be owned by another entity. And a lot of that will depend on what that project is. And so it could be the city of Moscow, it could be the city of Pullman. There could be a regional body created specifically for that project, a regional water board, for example. And so it will have to take on a different form at that point. But PBAC will continue to be the organization through which we coordinate with our partners.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Maureen? Oh, sorry, that's the mayor's job.
Okay, so I get concerned about making sure about the equity of everybody's use of water. And so when we being Moscow area have been better at conserving water than some other ones, is there some kind of incentive in this program to ensure that everybody is in for conserving in a similar manner so that we conserve, so that somebody else doesn't use more?
Yeah, that's something that's been a key part of our conversations that we've had, for example, in our work with Pullman, and that we hope to loop the other partners in on a regional conservation plan. I mean, when we look at some of the alternatives, for example, Alternative 3, that really has, it's one of the concerns is finding a mechanism for a balancing, because in this alternative, the reservoir with water coming directly to Moscow is the bulk of the water in this alternative and the bulk of the expense. And since this is on one side of the border and the other, if Moscow were to just bear the expense and the Moscow water users of the construction of the water that we're using now is the cheapest water we'll ever have. All of these alternatives will be more expensive water. And so if Moscow is disproportionately bearing the burden of that water alternative in order to stabilize the aquifer so that then other entities could pump cheaper water because Moscow's ratepayers were paying more for more expensive water, that would be problematic. And that's something that we've really been actively trying to avoid through our conversations on these. But for example, in Alternative 1, since there would be water delivered from a regional water body, we'd be buying that water. And so the users would be motivated by their rates because they're going to be paying, all the users would be paying the same rate for that water. And so the more you use, the more you're going to pay.
That doesn't apply to people who don't live within the city, because if you have your own house out there, you get your own farm out there, you don't pay for your water, you dug a hole and when it comes.
Yep. Yeah, the counties have been really good partners, and they have really, it is a more difficult thing because the county they don't have the ability to, they don't have a water meter. They can't do a rate study and say, okay, you're going to bear the proportionate cost of what the impact is. People can drill a well and they can pull the water out. And so really our best mechanism right now for that is just to have good messaging going out. We have a county conservation program that Lake Tahoe County actually put money toward out of their ARPA funds, which was really encouraging because they wanted to see a county specific conservation plan that PBAC is working on. So the counties have been good partners and they really want to help with that messaging. But being frank about it, messaging is with the mechanisms that we have with the laws in the state of Idaho right now, there's no way that we can mandate as the city some sort of use outside of our boundaries.
Education's the issue.
Might be worth making the point that most homeowners in the county don't go to the expense of drilling a well 900 feet down. They stop when they hit water from the upper aquifer, which doesn't impact the lower aquifer from which we draw most of our water.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mayor. They're by and large, and maybe exclusively in the Wanapum Aquifer in Latah County. And as you get out into rural Whitman County, they could be in the Grand Ronde just because the Wanapum doesn't make it over to Pullman. But the intertie between the Wanapum and the Grand Ronde, while there's likely some impact, it's fairly minor given the thick clay layers that separate the two.
Can you remind me who's pulling from the Wanapum right now? We have a few wells, but that's not where we're primary.
We have two Wanapum wells 2 and 3. We have not pumped either of those wells for quite some time. It's something that we have as a backup. For example, as we were doing our mainline work out in front of the Palouse Mall, we thought we might have to kick on one of those wells just because it was heat of the summer. Our flows were restricted from wells 9 and 10, which are our 2 main producing wells that have to push water over here to the east from the west end of town. But luckily we didn't. We were able to balance between well 6 and what we could get through from well 10. So we have not pumped those for a couple of years now, and there has been fairly significant recharge in the Wanapum Aquifer with Moscow not drawing from that.
I have a couple things. I was feeling some hesitation about the resuming focus on alternative 1 because it feels like a single point of failure. And I know that's not the case because it would be to supplement what we're already, the systems we do have in place. It's not like if something, let's say alternative 1, we go whole hog, we get it, and something goes sideways, we will still have water options. And I also have come to terms, I'm reminding myself that people much smarter than me in the energy industry, including my friends at SEL, remind me that pump storage is the most energy efficient way to generate and store energy. So I'm coming around to it. I do still have some concerns knowing how much of this is on Washington to navigate because I'm really concerned about permit duration, knowing how some of the things work in Washington state and the added layers that are well-meaning, but just can feel like a lot of additional red tape and what that can mean for our community in terms of footing the bill. But I am intrigued to learn more as we move forward. Also, you have a huge opportunity to make a joke about being well-positioned. Like no one laughed. We are well-positioned in this. So that's my pun for you to take, Tyler.
Always giving.
I will, give me the content. I'll give you a fun. So I have 3 other thoughts. So I'm trying to understand, and I think you partially answered it, what mechanisms the city has in place to fund these improvements beyond what we're doing for the study phase. And so it sounds like what would make the most sense probably in terms of navigating fees, tax usage would likely be a new entity to do so. Is that fair? I mean, other than we can't set up a piggy bank where we can be squirreling away money as a city to start buying pipe, right?
No, so almost exclusively projects of this scale end up with a patchwork quilt of funding that includes a hefty amount of federal funding. The IIJA, the infrastructure bill that was recently passed, has a fairly significant influx into programs like WIFIA, which is a federal water funding for this type of project, large scale water projects. So as a next phase is we've done some preliminary analysis on potential funding sources and how that could potentially be patched together. But really what we hear from a lot of the regulatory agencies is, look, in order to, we hand them something and they say, look, you kind of have to make application on something in order for us to actually give you answers on things. And that's really where we're at now, is that we've got to kind of quit dipping our toe and say, okay, we're going to stick our whole foot in on this so that we can get some answers and start to actually vet that out. And that's going to cost some money.
Yeah.
But ultimately the states are responsible for water supply. That is a state responsibility, not a local responsibility. And so that's why IDWR is a really important partner, DOE on the Washington side. So I know that's kind of a convoluted answer, but it will include a patchwork quilt of funding with likely large quantities of that funding coming from both the state and federal levels.
With likely a similar mechanism where when we have to fund really large multi-million-dollar road improvements where we don't necessarily have the money up front, we're looking at program options that are built for us to have low interest.
There are grants, there are low interest loans. WIFIA is typically a low interest loan program. So yeah, a combination of those things. And then, ultimately, once that is constructed, whomever is using the water with their rates would support the maintenance, operation, and eventual replacement of components of that system through the rates for the water. But that initial construction will include patchwork quilt of funding.
Quilting's great. I love it. And I know we talk a lot about how we can't conserve our way out of this. I had two thoughts. I can't remember if one of the things that Kelly helps with, do we do direct outreach with our local like hardware store vendors about things like the toilet rebate program and others? I can't remember. I haven't had to buy a toilet in a while. So
yeah, we do. That's a good question. We've had a lot of our success through direct outreach, both to our plumbing contractors in town and the hardware stores that know about the rebate program and how it works so they can help people navigate that. One of our biggest influxes of, for example, the toilet rebate was that we did direct outreach and direct mailers to our hotels and motels.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And, it's just some of those, like, instead of just sending a general thing out that people toss, it was like, hey, this is for you. This is targeted. So we've really tried to focus on targeted outreach, and we've had a lot more success with targeted outreach. And so, yeah, we had just hundreds and hundreds of toilets over a 2-year period that got replaced through just that direct outreach.
There's got to be a public art project in there with reclaimed toilets. I love it.
A porcelain tower.
And then I guess my last thing, I am mindful of us using city resources in a situation for something that affects more than just people outside of city limits. As far as like the water audit conversation, I wonder if there's an opportunity to work with the counties and educate people who are moving to the county who are excited to drill a new well and maybe are not from Idaho or not from the region and have come from very high water rate places. And, I would love to, that's something I'm happy to reach out to the commissioners to request, but I'm thinking the missing audit piece could be, or missing water teaching piece could be teaching the newcomers in the county about it. And I don't know if the water audit mechanism would be beneficial to people in the county outside city limits for them to piggyback on.
It potentially could. I mean, one of the challenges obviously that the county has is that they don't have a water funding mechanism.
Yeah.
Because they don't have a utility. So any money that they dedicate toward water has to come from a source that wasn't generated specifically for water.
Right.
It has to be more of a general funded item for the county. So they don't have the dedicated funds like we do to focus on it. But they have shown an interest and a willingness to put money toward it.
Yeah. And maybe it's just working with PBAC to develop something that could be like new to the area. What does it mean? The zoom out on what it means, where our water is coming from. Great that you're here. Also, please work towards this common goal that everyone benefits
And
from.
that's some of the education piece that we've got that we're working on with that county money, with the county conservation plan, is how to best message to county residents. Like what's the message that they need to
I'm not
get?
trying to control your actions. I'm just saying work together for the common goal. Yeah. Love it. That's all.
Well taken.
Yeah, one quick question. You talked about hotels and sending like specific resources so they don't feel like this are out. Have you done that with multifamily and other like developers? Because I know it's one thing for single family homes to do that, but if you can get 20 kind of in one swoop, especially when they're remodeling, right? Is that any efforts?
Yeah, we've had direct outreach to multifamily owners as well. We've done that through our property management companies, sending direct information to them, and we've had quite a bit of success. They're largely aware of the program and really willing to participate. It helps offset the cost of a toilet for them, and really with the some of the hesitation that people initially have, especially for example with the toilet rebate, is just that with a far lower gallons per flush, they think that they'll have less success flushing the toilet, that there'll be more clogs. But it's just not the case. The newly designed toilets are just a lot more efficient, and they really work really, really well.
Thank you.
I think I know the answer to the question. I think it's no, but do we have some kind of time frame by which we start thinking about, if we're now focusing right now on alternative one, because we've spent time in the past looking at focusing on other alternatives, and so now we're on one. Do we have a sense in terms of projection of time frame? Part of that has to come out with water right litigation, which is going to be huge. But I mean, we're talking about 10 years. Are we looking at another 20?
I really, really, really hope to have something under construction by the time I retire.
Your contract.
You're right.
You're
It's
young,
complicated.
though. You're young
This is long term. This is big infrastructure. But the thing that we've really been committed to and had broad support from our electeds across the board and on the committee is action. we're not just looking at this. We're not just tinkering with it with numbers. We're going to move. And that's something that our commitment is that we're going to keep it moving and moving in a positive direction. And that will take some financial commitment. We're going to have to put some money toward a NEPA analysis and, really start this process of committing to something and getting through it. But we're in an action phase and we're going to keep it moving.
My last question, Mr. Mayor. Will there be a communication plan within this phase? Because I'm picturing I'm specifically picturing some of the commentary that I've seen online about people who are like, you can't stick a straw in the Snake River from people in the valley teaching what successful projects have looked like. But just music to my ears would be that we do have a communication plan
We only have 3 standing committees on PBAC, and one of them is communication.
Great. Love it.
Budget, we have technical, but as you are all well aware, if you've heard me nag and harp on this over the years, several previous attempts at this crashed and burned because of that very thing, a lack of public involvement and public information. And so we are really committed. This is the images that you see here are one of our latest efforts in that direction, getting professional imagery that's understandable, that we can disseminate. And so, we have a subcommittee that is what they do, is how are we communicating this and make sure that we do not get any of those things out of alignment with the other components of this project.
Thank you.
You're on the record.
Yep. Good stuff. So retire quickly so we can get this.
That sounds like a plan, man.
Okay, thank you, Tyler. All right, next up is proposed City of Moscow procurement and purchasing policy. Bill Belknap.
I'm afraid this is going to not be nearly as exciting tonight. So for a little bit of background, the city has had long established financial policies related to the control over our finances and accounting for accounting principles and practice in our internal controls. But currently we do not have a policy that directly addresses procurement and purchasing. So who can purchase what at what dollar amount, who can authorize contracts, or who has the authority to establish charge accounts with vendors, and even some basic policies surrounding credit card use. So as a result of not having a policy, some of our historical practices, while I don't think we've had anything that I'd consider to be a violation, it's just been inconsistent across departments. And there's just been a lack of clarity and understanding among staff of their individual role and their abilities. So we are recommending the council establish a policy, provide that clear guidance for purchasing and contracting and use of credit cards and charge accounts for a city business. So the purpose of the policy, again, is to establish policies and clarify the procedures for purchasing supplies, materials, services by the City of Moscow employees to ensure strong ethical standards, individual and organizational accountability, and public transparency. So that's really what we're after. There are a number of goals identified in the policy, but first and foremost is to guarantee that our purchases comply with all state and federal requirements, to clarify purchasing procedures and ensure requirements are consistently followed by all city departments and city employees. To enhance public confidence by way of a publicly accountable purchasing process to prevent fraud and theft through internal controls, and to ensure purchasing decisions are based on high ethical standards, guard against favoritism, and promote the fair and equitable treatment of all persons who deal with the city. Within the policy, we also include a citation of all relevant state laws regarding ethics in purchasing. So all the citations regarding both procurement standards as well as ethics in government. We also have a section that addresses purchase management, vendor relations. Should make every effort to utilize that so we are not paying sales tax on our purchases, establishing budget requirements, providing a preference to ensure the local vendors have an opportunity to do business with the city, as well as providing directions on vendor charge counts, department supervisor responsibilities, as well as the department manager's responsibilities. Underneath the purchasing acquisition guidelines, we also address donations and negative fund balances. So what's the process if somebody wants to donate property or personal or real property to the city, the process by which to have that donation vetted and accepted, managing your funds so they aren't running negative, and then establishing purchasing authority for budgeted expenses. So for at the department manager level, that'd be an expense up to $10,000. For the deputy city supervisor or appointed officials include police chief and fire chief, that authority would be increased to $25,000, and then $75,000 for the city supervisor and the mayor at $150,000. Anything over $150,000, any expenditure, whether that is for contracted service or if that was a purchase of property, would have to be approved by the mayor and the city council. For contracts for services, again, providing a description of what constitutes a contracting agreement. Sometimes people don't think when they're signing a purchase order that has certain terms and penalties and interest. That is a contract. So providing that guidance so employees understand what is just an invoice and what is a contract, and then establishing the contract approval authority based on those expenditure levels that somewhat mirror the purchase levels. Again, under $25,000 for a budgeted expense, then a deputy city supervisor or appointed official could exercise or execute that contract. If it's not a budgeted or planned expense, then I would have to approve it with the mayor's approval as well, once funding had been identified for that purchase. Again, from $25,000 to $75,000. If it's a budget expense, then that would be the city supervisor authority with no additional authority necessary. If it's not a budgeted expense, then the mayor would have to sign that with the council's approval, and funding must be identified. And again, up to then $75,000 to $150,000. If it was a budget expense, the mayor could sign that contract. If it was not a budget expense, then that'd have to come before the council with identified funding. And then anything over $150,000 would come to the full council for the council's review and approval, whether budgeted or not. Contracts, and then we move into procurement requirements. So we did not provide full details because these do change every year. And there are multiple procurement manuals published within the state by Idaho Association of Cities and the Municipal Attorney Association, but we have just some general guidelines. So it's a bit of a cheat sheet that if you're procuring design professionals, so this is for engineering, architectural, landscape, construction management, and land surveying services. Under state law, if the cost of the service is under $50,000, then you can make the best decision based on demonstrated competence, but there's not a requirement to go through a full request for statements of qualifications. Any expense beyond $50,000, you have to go through a full qualification-based selection process where you advertise not based on price, but based on qualifications, select a qualified professional, and then negotiate the contract and the price. For services or personal property, those thresholds are a little bit different. So generally under $75,000, your selection is in the best interest of political subdivision for procuring the goods and services as determined by the city council. So that's just our independent judgment. If you're $75,000 to $150,000, you're required to get 3 quotes from 3 vendors. And then anything over $150,000 requires a full formal bid process. And public works construction thresholds are, again, a little bit different. Under $50,000, again, whatever's in the best interest of the political subdivision. Anything between $50,000 and $200,000, then for public works construction, it is the 3 electronic bids. And then anything over $200,000 is a full sealed bid process. We do have and have had now for a number of years a professional services pre-qualification roster where we advertise every 3 years for engineering, surveying, and other design professionals. We vet them, we qualify them, they get put on our list, and then we have a project, we can select somebody from that list and we can negotiate a task order and initiate the project. So we aren't going through an RFQ with every project that we are working on. Yes.
Do we have to pick the lowest bidder, or do we have to pick what we think is the highest qualified?
When it's design professional services, it's not based on price, it's based on qualifications. Now, if we do not feel that we can negotiate a reasonable contract with that design professional, we're free to pick somebody else on the list and try to negotiate that as well. But it's whenever you're doing qualification-based selection, it's based on their qualifications, and then you can negotiate the contract. If you're unsuccessful, you can move down to your next highest qualified candidate and try to negotiate the contract. So you're not bound by that one individual, but the principle is you're selecting not based on cost, but you're based on their technical abilities and skills. So we have that professional services pre-qualification roster was a separately adopted resolution. So we've brought that content into the body of this document. So it's all in one location. The one modification to that section was there was no threshold for underneath that policy, we could go through that pre-qualification, we'd have them on the list, we'd select them for a project, and then we would negotiate a task order. And then the city supervisor was authorized to sign the task order, but there was no threshold of the dollar amount. We have one task order that's currently being developed that's a over $2 million task order that I think is appropriate for the council to see. So when we brought the content of our existing pre-qualified service roster into the resolution, we also are requiring that the task orders follow the same authorization established in the contract table. So essentially we follow the same amount. Also include a section for leases. This establishes a review process for review and approval of all lease agreements, and then some basic risk management and insurance requirement language as well. And then we move on to the final section that relates to credit accounts, so charge accounts with local vendors. We have a number of those, as well as credit cards. For the vendor charge accounts, it just establishes standards, procedures for creating and managing vendor charge accounts. We have, in some instances, with some vendors, multiple accounts been opened by different departments. We do wish to consolidate those to have no more than one per department. We also want to set up a process. Policy also establishes a process for the city supervisor to authorize opening a charge account with a vendor to make sure that it's appropriate that we have one there, that we're going to be purchasing enough from that vendor versus one-time or two-time purchases. Because when you have a charge account, it does create the potential that somebody could charge something to the city that may be inappropriate. So we do want to limit the use to only those vendors we're going to be using fairly frequently. We also want to maintain a list of all employees that are authorized to sign on those accounts. So if they leave the city's employ, we can remove them from the list, and so on and so forth. For credit cards, we have some basic standards and procedures for the issuance of credit cards and adjustment of credit card limits. So that is for the city supervisor. We also are, and we do this in practice, but we don't have a document to require full detailed documentation for all credit card charges and purchases. I require the card holders to safeguard their card security, provide immediate notification if it's lost or stolen, require them to repay any disallowed charges. And then again, trying to encourage them to use the per diem reimbursement for travel meal expenses rather than charging on the credit card, because we did modify the personnel policies here a year ago that remind employees that even if they're using a credit card to pay for meals during travel on the city's behalf, they still have to follow their per diem rates for the geographic area they're in. So just encouraging them to do that to avoid having to credit back small amounts if they happen to exceed it by a small amount. And we also include a list of explicitly disallowed charges. So these should be obvious, but cash advances or items, services for personal use, expenses incurred by a spouse or for work spouse or family member, alcoholic beverages, fuel for privately owned vehicles, charges made outside the employee's approval authority, any split transactions trying to get around their transaction limits, or any purchases that might violate any portion of this procurement policy and ethical obligations, or anything restricted by laws, other laws, policies, or guidelines.
Mr. Mayor, I do have one question on that list. So for the fuel piece, I'm like, does that, what am I trying to ask? Sorry. Does that apply? Like if you drive to Boise and
So
you need to
you get
reimburse your
reimbursed at the
mileage
IRS mileage rate, but you don't charge fuel.
because the form that we turn, the collective we turn in documents like the miles traveled, and then that's how the reimbursement happens instead of it being on a credit. That is, I just wanted to make sure that we're
The
not stopping
IRS
you from being
Yeah,
able
the
to
IRS mileage reimbursement rate covers fuel, the vehicle's use, wear and tear of the vehicle.
okay.
Everything is included in the mileage rate. You can take a credit card if you're taking a city vehicle. You can use it to fuel the city vehicle, but you can't use it to fuel your personal
Got it.
vehicle.
Thank you.
That's just one of those things we just need to
And the IRS made it easy by
safeguard.
giving us the
Yes.
number. So love it.
So this proposed policy was reviewed by the Public Works Finance Committee on October 9th and recommended for approval. So staff recommends council approve the proposed resolution adopting the procurement and purchasing policy. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the council might have.
I don't have any questions, and you're right. It's probably not nearly as exciting as Tyler. But it is just, honestly, it's close to as important. And I'm kind of doing this the whole time thinking we didn't have this formalized all of these years. And I guess living in the university right now,
Yeah,
there's
no
all
kidding.
kinds of this stuff. It makes my little local business heart sing that you call out trying to get local vendors whenever possible, that kind of thing. That makes me happy. So I just think it's a very good thing and a very long time coming. And thank you for the minutia that you went through.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Is that a motion?
it is a motion. Wow.
Second.
Yeah.
There we go.
Well, what was the motion?
I move that we
Motion to
approve the
approve.
proposed resolution adopting the proposed procurement and purchasing policy, please.
Peter picked up.
Yeah.
And we got a second from Maureen.
Yes, we did.
I just have one more question.
Yes.
I'm sorry if this is an outrageous question, but you did call out on there that they could not purchase alcohol. Have you thought about how easy it is to purchase marijuana in other neighboring states? Like, what if I just decided to have a Cheez-Its from Floyd's and a Coke for dinner?
Then you
Honestly, did not. That would be strictly
Thought about
prohibited.
it. I mean,
on-
I don't think
Sure.
anybody would do it. but-
Good question.
I think the last item on that list would catch anything else prohibited by law.
But if you're in a conference in Washington, is it still our law that we have to go by if it's not illegal to purchase it there?
Well, it'd be our policy that states they cannot use drugs. Our drug-free workplace policy and our personnel policies would probably come more into effect. If you wish to amend it, we could add or any other. I mean, the problem is if we say illegal drugs or drugs illegal in the state of Idaho.
If you think it covers it, I'm okay with it, but I think that's a.
I think
good
that would be
question.
probably clear. I think it's more common that somebody would go and pay for a meal they're traveling
Yeah.
and have a drink with their meal.
That's fine.
It's less likely they're going to take the city credit card to a dispensary.
Okay.
I
So
think they're casual.
that'd be
They can use
pretty
them.
bold if they did.
Okay.
It was just a thought.
Yeah.
Random thought.
Like it.
Okay. All right, I'm done. I'll leave it up to your judgment.
Okay, motion and seconded. So Maureen, Gina,
Aye.
Julia,
Aye.
Haley,
Hi.
Drew,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
and that passes. Good stuff. Item number 7, ladder truck fire engine purchase approval. Also, Bill.
So here's one of those large purchases for the council's review. The city's sole ladder truck is approaching 23 years of age at this point. So it is, once you get to the 20-year service life, 25-year service life, you're looking at replacing that vehicle. So we are in need of replacing that. The city does contract with University of Idaho for police and fire services underneath the master services agreement. And under that agreement, the university has agreed to pay for half of the replacement ladder truck that was intended to take place during the first term of that agreement that runs through, I think, 2026. That's one of the reasons the city has a ladder truck is due to some of the taller structures on campus. The office tower was the initial one that constituted the need for us to have that tower or that ladder truck because it is required for our fire rating. We have received quotes on the ladder truck, and right now it's looking at the quote we received from the Hughes Fire Equipment is $1,549,896. So they are not inexpensive pieces of equipment. That amount is after $162,564 of prepayment credits. So there are various credits you can receive if you pay for components of the fire engine at times of it being constructed, or you pay it all up front at one time. So we think it'd be in the city's best interest to take advantage of the full credits, which would provide that $162,000 in prepayment discounts. This quote is valid through October 27th of this year. And then after that, the price will step up a little over $29,000. They are doing quarterly price escalations at this point in time. So it's moving up. The next quarter is moving up $29,000. At this point, we don't know what the next escalation is, but we do hope to secure and take advantage of this quote if we can. We have provided underneath the master service agreement, we are required to provide the university with 12 months advance notice of the intent to purchase the replacement ladder truck, which we provided to the university on October 2nd. And we're in the process of getting correspondence back, acknowledging the receipt and confirming the university's commitment to that purchase underneath the agreement. The lead time right now, at the time that the CCR was prepared, it was 44 to 49 months from the time of order to the point of delivery. They've now received notice, slid that back another 3 months on both ends. So now we're looking at about 47 months to 52 months before we would see the ladder truck.
What year is that?
Yeah, so we're looking at the ladder truck being close to 27 to 28 years old before it ultimately gets replaced. Fleet, has maintained the vehicle well. It will continue to be able to operate, but it will get to the point where at some point, not too far after that point, parts probably will likely stop being available. So it's important for us to get that replaced. So what we are seeking this evening is the council's approval to place the order for the replacement ladder truck fire engine. It will be for the $1,549,896, and the university will have essentially a year to make the full payment. So we'll have to make that full payment by the end of October of 2024. So we'll be able to secure the university share. We have accumulated our portion within the fleet fund, and then we will make that payment in 2024.
And they can stop charging us every month.
There is a provision that if there's some sort of exceptional requirements in the supply chain or in standards, that they can actually increase it more, but we'll lock in this rate. So we will avoid any normal escalation, but there's kind of an exceptional escalation clause that there's a potential that if there's something that it may increase in price before the time it's delivered.
Is there any granting opportunities, like a grant out there to get?
There is. So you may recall for the last 2 fire trucks that we've purchased, we have applied for grants to fund half of those engines. So I think those grants were close to $300,000 because the engines were right around $600,000. We have confirmed with the Department of Commerce that we can make an application on this, even if we've placed the order this year.
Cool.
And so we could be open for the application cycle in November of next year. So it'd be right around the time that we'd be making the full payment. We could make a request for a grant that could fund up to $500,000 towards the ladder truck.
I've got 2 questions. One, and I'm sure Chief was in on this conversation. I'm looking at the 179-page proposal, including like the operation manual. I'm curious if this new truck will result in some like additional heavy-duty training for the drivers. Do we know? I mean, we've got years to plan for budgeting for that for Moscow Volunteer Fire Department.
So it
but
should
is
be
it that
very,
different?
very similar to our existing ladder truck, just newer, updated. They did travel to the manufacturer's plant to look at ladder trucks to identify and sat down and came up with a build for this one, what they would like to have on it. But there's nothing that's going to be extraordinary, unusual, or different on this than our existing equipment.
And my other question is, I love the part, I think Gina also has mentioned this a few times, where we get to sell surplus for $1. I don't know what friends and neighbors we have who need a ladder truck, but are we going to have difficulty if and when we can retire our 27-year-old buddy and giving it to sending it to someone else who could still get some use out of it?
Let's reach out that time to see what agencies might be in need. I think the last one we had went to Colfax.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And so I think we'll certainly go through the process when it's time to surplus it and see if there's an agency that could benefit from its use.
Cool. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Gina.
I had one clarification question, Bill, and I think I didn't doze off, but I lost focus. Tell me again the status of the other half of the money right now. Has the university said they will pay it?
So the university, I did request, so when we presented this to committee, what Brian had been led to believe by the salesperson is we could place the order now, and then we could cancel it up till October of next year, and we would have no penalty. That's not true. When we got the contract Wednesday of last week, it does have a 10% penalty if we were to close it. If we were to cancel the order before, it has actually increasing stages of penalties depending upon how far you are into the design and build process. But the initial stage for the first year would be a 10% penalty. So that's why I've requested a letter from the university confirming the receipt of the 12-month notice and affirming their commitments. Because otherwise, when we sign this order, if we didn't have, if we were October of next year, we wouldn't have the funding in hand to pay the full amount. So there is a slight risk, but we really don't want to delay another year given that we're already 50 months in delivery time. We do want to get the order in queue and take advantage of that. And we're confident that the university is committed to participating in this purchase as well.
Cool. Sandra.
I move that we approve placing the order for the replacement ladder fire engine.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay. Gina,
Aye.
Drew,
Aye.
Haley,
Aye.
Julia,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
and Maureen.
Aye.
Okay, that passes. And we move on to reports. Is everybody ready to roll with the report?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll start with Gina this time.
Okay, since there was no tree commission last time,
It's good that you made it back.
I've been mourning. Good morning, I'll admit it. I did attend an all-day or most of the day Association of Idaho Cities meeting, and I always kind of grumble because they're a long meeting and you have to sit in semi-uncomfortable chairs, similar to the ones you're all sitting in right now.
These are nicer than they were.
Oh, yeah,
It
but they're
has to
still
be.
bad. But anyway, I actually learned something this time, and I find that it's a very good investment of time, and it gets me all fired up about being a city councilor again. I have planning and zoning on Wednesday evening. They changed the date on us this time, and so I don't have much else to tell you other than that.
That was quick and easy. Maureen.
RTC is canceled because they want everyone to go to the Palouse Aquifer, Palouse Basin conference coming up. The farmers market was probably the last time we're going to see Amanda at one of those meetings for quite a while, at least a couple months. But we're really getting ready to have it stop at the end of this month, and we've done a great year with it. Incredible number of people who've wanted to have booths and have negotiated in over every single week. There's some negotiation in terms of who gets a booth and where it is. And there's also a URA meeting this week, and it's going to look at some of the additional information on the design.
For 6th and Jackson.
6th and Jackson. Well, that's the only issue we got on the market. So thank you for clarifying.
Sandra.
All right. I would agree with Gina. This was the least objectionable AIC meeting I have been to.
You managed to object a couple times, though.
Yeah, but only a couple. Like
Yeah.
I didn't
It was
want to pull
awesome.
my hair out and walk away. So that was great. That was a huge improvement. I was happy about that. Did get to go to the volunteer fire meeting on Wednesday, which had a lot of talk about homecoming, which I'll just move right into. The pancakes were great. They were not too soggy, the perfect amount of maple syrup. The sausages and syrup went together great, and the orange juice was delightful. And it was great to see a lot of folks there. And the farmer's market was it was hard. I know the vendors had a hard time, but being someone that not grew up here, but came here when it was still the parking lot on Jackson, it was back there again, and all the tents were out. And it was very quaint and cute, and just reminded me of how much I was taken by Moscow when I first moved here. And I know they're all excited to get back to where they want to be, but for a half a minute, it was pretty cool to see that. And then it was great to see so many folks out at homecoming. So it was a big weekend. It was also Moscow High's homecoming, which was fun. They didn't win, but that's okay. So go Bears. It was great to hear them. I don't live very far from the field, and you can hear the music and you can hear the cheering, and every once in a while you kind of forget and think, oh no, what is that? It's like, oh, it's the tuba. It's okay. So all good things going on. Let's see. Let me see if I have anything else on here. No, I think Brewfest. Brewfest was fun. And then at the same time, it was also Mikey's retirement party. So all good things going on downtown. And I really appreciated that the mugs this year have a good handle on them that didn't break. So that was great. And it was good weather. So we've really lucked out with our events and the weather. So pretty busy week and a half.
Julia.
All right, so Arts Commission was canceled this month, and so was Transportation Commission. But I did go to the Idaho Healthy Community Challenge, which is a coordinated effort with the Wasmuth Center for Human Rights, and they are establishing groups in 8 different locations in Idaho who are working to prevent joining of hate groups. I guess that's it. But they're working to prevent violent extremism. It's a really interesting model that they're using, like a public health model, and just trying to work, especially with young people, to give them good tools for critical thinking and for alternatives to hate. So that was an interesting group, and they are looking for additional people to join that effort. I also attended the Pink Cocktail, the Gritman Foundation fundraiser, and that was a great event, as always. And Megan Cherry introduced one of the speakers at that event, who is our arts director. Thank you. I was trying to think of her title. She did a great job. And I would say that I went to the best sport, girls cross country.
How'd your girls?
Go Bears.
Go Bears.
And your girls did.
And the girls cross country team is doing great. Go Bears. Much more interesting than, another sport.
Also attended the Pink Cocktail fundraiser for Gritman. Got to see Sandra and Julia there. Immediately went home and hugged my mom because one of the speakers is a WSU student who lost his mom to cancer. And so it just hits you right in the heartstrings. I caught part of AIC, which was great. Art Walk kicks off on Thursday at 4 in a lot of locations. Some cool new, it's been really fun seeing the list of businesses hosting Evolve. The Elks are hosting. If you haven't been out to the Elks golf course, it's a great space. So that'll be a lot of fun. Had a great time at the homecoming parade. I will be emailing our streets friends and Bill because the kids this year were feral, and I would love to talk about some better systems to discourage kids from running in front of cars in the parade. Yeah, I don't know. It's great. I mean, glad they have a great time. I think the sunshine brought something out in everybody.
Maybe
and the candy. That's for everyone. You're right.
Sugar. Feral is the right word.
Yeah.
Possibility there.
Yeah. Today's Monday. Yesterday, the library had their quarterly repair cafe. I got a book fixed and not a leather purse fixed, but I have plans to go in January. It's a great program. Check the library website for it. It's a great movement. But this is my meeting heavy week. I've got Smart Transit and Human Rights Commission, and just going to make 2 quick plugs. Moscow Contemporary has an art gallery opening at 6:30 on Friday, which is going to be a really great conversation. I'm surprised my Historical Society didn't plug the Psychiana capsule unboxing on the 7 p.m. Since I don't get to see everyone until November in a week from, is it on Monday? It is on Monday. I think it's the 23rd. But there's a cool time capsule thing and a Psychiana presentation from our Historical Society friends, and then also making a plug to register your business for the downtown trick or treat through the Moscow Chamber. But lots of great things. Have a great, safe Halloween, and let's hope the rain. I mean, I've trick or treated many years growing up here in the rain, and yeah, we'll still show up in great numbers. So.
And snow.
Yes, and snow.
And beautiful weather.
Sweet. Yeah, so attended the U of I County City Breakfast meeting on Wednesdays, beginning of the month. It's always good to hear what our partners in the community are doing, involved in, and it's also just good conversation as well. Fair and affordable housing was canceled, but there are lots of people working on some of those issues here in town, and I'm confident that we have the right resources helping some of those folks. And then next week is Parks and Recreation. And we just had a presentation tonight, and I got to say, Kat and Gretchen that were here, Gretchen was in the audience. They're very involved. They're very dedicated, and they're moms that coach these sports. And so they're fantastic, and I appreciate working on that commission and all the work that they're working with, I should say, that commission, and all the work that they're doing. And then, also noticed that there's a lot of kids at the parade. Felt the wave. I was with my kids, trying to keep them riding scooters, but also, there was a lot. It was good turnout, and then also went to the game. So another good thing, and obviously involved in some other things here in the city.
Devastating loss.
So, that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Cool. I've got a few things that date back a while because I missed a meeting while I was away, but ITD had a district meeting down in Lewiston, and we got an overview of what ITD, Idaho Department of Transportation, is up to these days. Went to the Moscow Chamber of Commerce ribbon cutting downtown with their new facility, which looks great. And if you haven't been there, you should stop in. They've got a great visitor's guide out now that would benefit even those of us who are in town and not visiting. They got a lot of good stuff in there. Also a great map of the biking trails in town. So pick up one of those to navigate your way around. Attended the airport board meeting. There are 2 jetways now in place. The third one's going in here pretty quick. The roof is on the place. The exterior walls are going up and they're starting to work on the interior now. So the airport terminal is well on its way to being finished. Hooray. It can't happen soon enough. Every time I go to the old one, I just go, oh, come on, open the new one, please.
I still keep waiting for a flight to Denver or someplace, to tell you the truth, just in case you want my opinion on that. So, I mean, you can talk about the building. I'm sitting here thinking, like, well, so what? We can still get a flight to Denver out of this one.
I guarantee you we are working it. We're like the debutante. We're dating several airlines at once, actually. United, Delta, Alaska. So
Controversy when you do that, but let me just.
we don't care. We're two-time it.
Whatever it takes.
Yes. So ITD also came to town where we did a walk audit of our couplet zone, trying to figure out what to do about highways 8 and 95 right over here, and how best to mitigate some of the heavy truck traffic going through the middle of town and facilitate safety and flow through design and operation of the roads, essentially.
It's just normal driving on that besides being in trucks. I mean, that's just a tough one.
So we get things settled with, rerouting traffic, other means to get around town. If you want to stop, you can stop. If you don't, we'll provide an alternate, things like that. Let's see, October 2 to 6, I was in DC with Tony Bean, the airport manager, and Glenn Johnson, mayor of Pullman, talking with our congressional delegations about airport issues and funding, as well as posing some of the water alternative plans to the federals. And there was a lot of interest there. Maria Cantwell in particular was really attentive to that. We spent 40 minutes with her and she would have gone on, except she had to leave to go to Senator Feinstein's funeral in California. Her staff were pulling on her sleeve to get her out of there, but she was very captivated by it. Had the AIC meeting for District 2 the other day. Homecoming was well done from start to finish, made for a long, bloody day, and almost made it at the football game. It was that close. So
you get VIP seats, so there we go.
Well, the VIP seats were good because they had a play come crashing right in there as everybody sailed out of bounds and right through the barricades and into the tables and the other people.
You're in the game.
Very exciting. Also, one other note, if you happen to see me wandering about town in an aimless fashion, I'm not all that aimless. I'm part of the mayor's 10,000 steps per day campaign. And so say hi to me, break up the monotony of walking in circles around town. At the end, if I get 310,000 steps, the city gets a check for $1,000 to spend on fitness and exercise.
Yeah, what's your deadline?
When's your deadline?
The 31st.
All right.
So
It'd be a big Halloween.
they chose a 31-day month instead of February with 28 days. Good.
You'll like the weather better.
Yeah.
Probably don't have to wear your yaks.
So that's what I've got. Anything from staff?
Nothing, staff.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Any
All in
objection?
favor? Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you very much.